Is your church a business or a ministry? Or both? Today I'm talking with Joel Engle all about how you can use practical business tips for ministry. Let's do it.
This is the definitive podcast for helping you plan, create, and execute dynamic worship experiences at your church. Useful, practical content in the areas of production, worship, communications, first impressions, and more. This is Making Sunday Happen.
Hey guys, welcome to the podcast. Today we are diving into the topic of business practices for ministry. Now I know what you're thinking. We're a church, not a business. I know. Trust me, I'm fully aware that we are in the spiritual business, in the business of seeing life change happen, salvation and discipleship in our communities. Trust me, I know. All true. But with an open mind, are there things that we can learn from the business world that we can incorporate into how we make Sunday happen? Sunday has become a huge content source for the local church. How can we leverage that content to have a greater impact in our physical gatherings, in our online gatherings on Sunday, and throughout the week as well? As a leader in a church, you are dealing with budgets, you're dealing with HR, you're dealing with personnel, you're dealing with sales, and the like. Sometimes there's a need to mix business acumen and ministry together to have a great impact in your community. So that's what we're talking about today with Joel Engle. Joel has been in ministry a long time in several different fields and industries as a Christian music recording artist, a church planner, a pastor. Today, you're going to hear Joel's heart on how you can incorporate business practices and also have a passion and a heart for ministry. That conversation with Joel is coming right up.
My name is Aaron McClung, and I'm the founder and principal here at AM. And I'm a business owner like you. And like you, I know how hard it is to keep things afloat and moving in the right direction year after year. You may feel like your business is stuck in the mundane rut of doing things the way you've always done them. But you also know that doing things the way you've always done them is not going to get you where you need to go. We put so much effort in trying to make our businesses profitable. That grind can wear you and your team down. I'm here to tell you that if you really want to make your business relevant and profitable, it starts by making it meaningful. It's not about hiring better people or building a better widget. It's about purpose. And it starts with you. When you build your culture and your brand around your company's purpose, it becomes the unifying focus that clears the way for you to achieve your vision. What your team and your customers want is to believe that your company is making lives better. They want to align with brands that believe what they believe and stand for what they stand for. In fact, research shows that 63% of consumers would rather buy from companies they consider authentic. Employees are 3 times as likely to stay at purpose-driven companies. In over a 15-year period, purpose-driven companies returned 1,681% compared to the 118% for the S&P 500. That's 14 times the ROI. You can't ignore that type of impact. The most influential brands in the world are built on purpose. Their purpose is their foundation. It's what attracts their audiences to them. It's what turns their employees and customers into raving fans. Their brand is built on their purpose story, and their culture embodies it every day. And that's where we come in. We're AM, and we help bring your company's purpose to life. Our overflow process will clarify your purpose and drive business growth. We'll uncover your why, align it with your team and your customers. We'll give you the tools and processes to help you communicate it and live it out every day. And that's how you take things from mundane to meaningful. And meaningful leads to profitable. I've seen firsthand how purpose can change the entire culture of your business. And it can happen faster than you think. It's powerful, it works, and it's our purpose to help you get there.
Hey guys, today I welcome Joel Engle. Joel has been in ministry for a long time, worship leader, Christian music recording artist, lead pastor, church planner, speaker, author. He's taking on a brand new role as the Chief Growth Officer at the AM Agency, which helps influential companies, churches, and organizations rethink their branding and possibilities for the future. Joel, welcome, man. Thanks so much for hanging out.
Hey, Carl, it's awesome, man. I'm excited.
So I have a confession to make. So I was a youth pastor way back in the day. And I would take students to student life camp.
Yep.
And wouldn't you know it, a guy named Joel Engle on the stage leading worship way back in the day.
Way back in the day, yeah. Those were good times. I'd always talk to, my different Christian artist friends, and they're like, "What's your favorite time of year?" I'm like, to me, like summer camp with teenagers is like Christmas, because you have a whole week and it's just they're away from the world. You're able to cultivate that unbelievable worship experience with teenagers who are so transparent and real. So that was really that was my most favorite time of the year. And so still look back at those days with great fondness, and little misty eyed when I think about it too much. But some great times.
Have you seen, this is way off the beaten path, have you seen that Netflix movie, A Week Away?
I have not.
It's like a teeny bopper movie, okay? But it is a musical, Christian musical, but it pulls songs from the 90s. So it's like Stephen Curtis Chapman diving in, Place in This World, Michael W. Smith, Big House.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the weirdest thing, but it got me thinking, like, when I was a teenager, if this movie was made in the mid 90s, like it would be the only thing on the church bus that would be on the TV. Like that would be you got to check it out.
Okay. So what's it called?
A Week Away. It's about a summer. It's like camping, like a summer camp.
Yeah.
For kids, but it's a weird mix of like 90s Christian music mixed with like a, teen romance. It's really weird. It's like I was expecting like, okay, this is cheesy Disney, movie kind of thing, but I was kind of surprised with it. But anyway, you got to check it out.
It sounds like it's like a Christian high school musical.
It is. It's totally that. But I didn't know if you'd seen that, because you would totally vibe with Christian.
But I will.
Yes. I want to hear back. I want to hear reports back from you on that one.
Okay.
All right. So that's part of your story, but tell me a little bit more. You've done worship leading, songwriting. You've kind of been in the Christian music space and pastor space, right? Yeah.
So, when I was in high school, came to know the Lord, and, not far after I became a Christian, I felt a burning call to ministry. And so, my pastor kind of discipled me. And so I preached and wrote songs and wrote, and I really wanted to be, Michael W. Smith. That was my goal. And went to college, studied music, and, graduated. I thought, where's my record deal? Like they didn't show up at my graduation. And then I was like, oh my goodness, I've had no plan. I just thought God was going to drop it all. And so, I began to travel and do concerts. Praise and worship wasn't like it is today. It was like hymns in church on Sunday, praise choruses for youth, or like California churches. And then, and so, I just could see myself going on tour. And in the process, I got heavily involved in youth ministry, like leading worship and youth ministry and camps, and then, wound up traveling with large ministries. But the whole time writing like songs, like regular songs for Christian radio. And over time, people recorded my songs. My bass began to grow. But the whole time, I still taught the Bible a lot, and I, preached. And so around, I guess when I was about 36, I wrote a book for Lifeway called The Exchange on Romans 6:7, how to live the Christian life. And there was a turning point where I had the number 2 song on the radio, and God called me to go plant a church. I'm like, Lord, this doesn't make sense. Told a lot of people, they're like, you're right, it doesn't make sense. But my wife and I, and some people close to us prayed. We wound up planting the Exchange Church, and I literally got rid of my website. I just literally went off the grid. Music wise, because I knew that like if I didn't burn the ships, I would go back. And that was exactly the truth. It was the right call from my personality. So grew this church. God put his hand on it. The process, I was at a discipleship conference, and this ministry staff from Anchorage, Alaska was in one of our social spaces. And at the end of the week, they're like, "Hey, would you consider being our senior pastor?" I'm like, no. Alaska? No, but I'll pray for you.
Yeah, right.
There's the whole, I'll pray for you guys. And 6 months later, they're like, "Hey, would you consider?" I'm like, no, but I'll find a guy. And then God just one day, shot an arrow into my heart. And then his divine orchestration led us to move our family to Anchorage, Alaska, pastor this church, wound up about 3,500 people. We planted 3 campuses. Then felt a call back to maybe a smaller church that could grow in a different area. I've always had a kind of a pioneering spirit. So I moved in the true spirit of pioneering, moved from Alaska to Oklahoma, and pastored a church there for 2 years, and then felt God transitioning me to kind of go back and be in a sense, a kingdom entrepreneur, which is kind of what I did and have done my whole ministry. I just never used terms like, business development, or it was like grow the ministry, or like program management. It's like, get it done. Yeah. But when I look back, I was like, good night. All this stuff is really, business is not just this evil, huge corporation goes around. It doesn't have to be that. It's a part of our daily lives. And so now I'm working with the AM agency, and we are basically going into Christian businesses and helping them integrate their faith with good, solid business practices and implementation, from, finding what your why is, to your brand, to recreating your culture, your like daily organizational culture, to how to actually market, which is not just advertising, but telling a story that really captivates people to step in. And so much of that is stuff that I've done in ministry. It's not dissimilar. It's just, instead of getting paid by the church, I'm getting paid by AM, and it's still, and one of the things that we're talking about is, in our churches, probably one of the least utilized missional forces in the church are business leaders. And so, and that's kind of where my heart is. But I look at the day-to-day operations of the church, what it means to be an elder. An elder is supposed to look after the affairs of the church. So, business and ministry and Christianity are not opposed to one another. They actually, God knows more about business than anybody. Right. So yeah, that's kind of like my little helicopter ride of my life.
Yeah. So obviously this podcast is about making Sunday happen and the worship experience. There's a lot that leads up to that. There's a lot that goes beyond the Sunday experience. Obviously that one moment in the week is not the end all be all. It's a weekly thing. But tell me, let's kind of get started here. How does business relate to the Sunday morning experience and building your worship experience, both coming into it, the day of, and coming out of it?
Yeah. So, I think you have several buckets that are extremely important. We're talking about organizing people around a common goal. So, like back in the day, it was like the pastor and the worship pastor got together like at lunch on, Thursday, and like, what are we going to do? Well, 2, 3, 4 songs and I preach. Okay. And that's how, and like, we got to make sure that they have the sound turned on. And, now, the church experience on Sunday morning has become unbelievably sophisticated and complex. Some people would say too complex. It needs to be simplified. Mm-hmm. But our world has become more complex, and our world has switched from, an agrarian or industrial world to a technological digital world. And that's the way that it is. And so, I mean, even right now, we're communicating instead of going to Starbucks or me flying to Nashville and going to Starbucks and talking, we're using technology. So I think the first part is preparation, getting the people who are going to put together on the same page, not just in executing the project, the many projects that happen every Sunday, but making sure, and this is like what we do at AM, is making sure that we're tapping into the why, because the thing that I think what people would criticize about like business and church is that we're doing it for the wrong motivations, and we're using physical things to try to create spiritual outcomes. When the bottom line is that all of it is about God overflowing his life out of ours. And so we have to begin by going, hey, this is why we do this. We're not doing Sunday just to get butts and seats or to get a good offering, although we want people to come in but we want impact. Right. And so I think it begins with rallying people around the real legitimate vision of what we're about. I think then it comes to, execution of executing these things properly. One thing back in the day when I led worship behind a piano, it was just me and piano and, a PowerPoint or even overhead projectors.
With the crank thing, with the Sharpie.
It didn't take a whole lot of it took some organization, but now, I mean, like to be able to, for all the musicians to hear themselves and to be able to, broadcast online, because now a whole new world and a whole new frontier of ministry has made itself available to us, and we're leveraging it like never before. All of these things require different skill sets that the church has never really leveraged before. And so that also requires a level of execution. You call it professionalism. It's about excellence, but never at the expense of the vision or of the power of the Holy Spirit. And so, just like a Christian businessman, hopefully they're praying before their business meetings, but I wouldn't want like a Christian neurosurgeon to not be prepared right before they're doing brain surgery on me.
Right.
I'd want that person to really have their team together. And so I think there's the organizational side of planning and preparation. There's the execution. And then afterwards, there's the debriefing of, okay, how did it go? And how can we make it better? And then you get your reps in. I mean, that's just simple, because I think, G.K. Chesterton said the simplification of anything is always sensational. And so when we simplify in terms of, preparation, execution, and then debriefing, those are just buckets for how we simplify things, but it's not simplistic. There are complicated ramifications when we simplify something, but it helps us. And I think what happens is you have two extremes. Either you have people who pay very little attention to preparation, execution, and debriefing, or you have people who make that their idol and they become a slave to that process. And right. So the idea is these processes are made to deliver a message and to deliver the love and the life of Christ. But these buckets are just simply tools that God has given us in our toolbox so that we can become effective.
I think you make a great point, and I was talking with William Vanderbloemen the other day at Vanderbloemen Group about how churches are having to hire people that they might have never hired before with skill sets that the church might have never really needed, especially as a staff position before. I mean, you're talking about branding, project management, digital marketing. You're talking about technology roles, social media roles, video and media. I mean, all these roles that they didn't exist in church world 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And so I think that you're seeing the church trying to hire those people. And then on the flip side, you're seeing, more creatives. Either do I want to be on a church staff? Would I rather freelance and, work? So there's this weirdness here, and we're an outsourced media company. We are, your creative team. If your church doesn't have a creative team, and so there's a weird mix of all that right now. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, yes. I mean, certainly, COVID scrambled the eggs of everybody.
Yes.
Even theologically, I'm not even sure how I square this away with my theological training. But we were like, hey, listen, it's about small group community, and it's about, Sunday morning is not the end all be all. And then COVID hit and we couldn't meet face to face in homes. That was the last place that you might want to go, at least at one point in time. And yet it also created a real longing for connection. At the same time, all of a sudden, like churches who had no streaming ministry at all were scrambling like crazy, because the only way they could broadcast the message of the gospel and of the hope of how do we actually get through COVID together as Christians, how do we navigate this, it was through the internet and through streaming.
Right.
And then all of a sudden it's like, they had all these different levels of quality, and now it seems like the quality is, now everybody realizes that Sunday morning is very important. It's not an artificial spot on the week that we just have some, emotional music and a guy that gives an inspiring. No, it matters. Sunday morning matters. It drives the culture of the church. It should be the outflow of the culture and the vision of the church. It's how you now, your website is the lobby of your church in so many ways, and that's probably not going to change in the near distant future. So there has been a shift of valuing, and on top of that, Sunday morning has become even more about content creation. Like, you have to really think about your message now, because it's going to go out to a wider audience and you can't control it. And so, so there's all these different people like graphic designs and, camera people who are, and I think it's amazing. I mean, when I start seeing the implications, there's a church that I work with in Virginia. They had 15,000 people every Sunday morning in their church. And when COVID hit, the stuff in Washington, D.C., they were shut down for 2 years. Now they have 65,000 active, engaged people that they have that meet through streaming. And now they've gone back just a few weeks ago, back to live. Their budget went from like 40 million to 75 million. I mean, it's the global engagement that they discovered. And what's interesting is that pastor, who's a friend of mine, we both had pretty similar view, which is, I really don't want to do this online church thing. That stuff that Life Church does so well, they can do that. And everybody realizes, wait a second, you can reach. I mean, they have people that are coming to Christ in Liberia, in Portugal, and they're becoming disciples. And they're saying, this church in Washington, D.C. is my church now.
Right.
And so it's fascinating.
Yeah. I think a lot of pastors had to come to a realization of that. And I think that, at first they saw their numbers skyrocket, churches everywhere, it was through the roof, and they were, whoa, we're reaching so many more people. And that, the numbers have kind of come back down and kind of leveled off in most places. But still, if you are not doing being intentional about your online experience as well as your physical experience, you've got to be, you're going to be behind. You've got to be intentional about both, and how you market that, and how I think that comes back to this business discussion of, you're really serving two audiences. You're serving the physical space audience, and you're serving the online. Now, some people do it the same way, where it's, a camera back in the back of the room and it's a live stream, but there's multiple ways to do the online experience. And so I think it brings in the business discussion in that, how do we market our online experience versus our physical gathering? And how do we, how do we take snippets of the sermon and break it up? And go smaller chunks? Or how do we minister on YouTube? Like, there's all these, I think more business questions are being raised to the surface.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about the tension. So obviously, somebody listening might be like, well, our church is not a business. We're a ministry, which is, a valid point. So walk the tension out for me. How do you, frame that business versus ministry, or together as one?
Well, in the most base terms, a business is a way you make a living, right? So, and you make a living by doing certain things, and then you get money. So if you think about those, it's tough to put church in there, except that a church has to have money to be able to function. And so the Apostle Paul made it clear instructions about how these things were to go about, that elders not only were to care for the spiritual needs of the church family, but also to look after the affairs of the church. And these affairs include financing. And Paul talked about, like, in 2 Corinthians 8-9 about, having one church send money to the famine relief efforts in the church in Jerusalem, and so we get a lot of our theology on giving. But I think in the end, a purpose, a business exists and can make a magnificent impact in culture. Think about, but either for good or for bad. There's no middle ground. You think about one company, and I think a church is an organization that can make an impact. And yes, it requires, but the way that it requires finances, but the end goal, I think for many, like companies that tend to transcend over others, is that their goal is to make an impact in the world. And that's happening, whether it's for good or for bad. We see it in the business of like big social marketing or social media companies. And are they making good or bad in the world? And then they seem to be leaning this political side, or they have these set of values, and these values from these businesses are trickling into the culture. Well, I think the church is in that sense, is the ultimate business, in that we have a message. And, all my theologian friends, please forgive me for I'm about to, but we have a product that can literally change and revolutionize your life. But it's a spiritual message in Christ. And so, but the problem is that so many businesses operate on the what. Hey, we offer these products for this price, and you should get them because, they're cool. But the businesses that seem to transcend that are about the why. Like Facebook wasn't about the internet. It was about community. It was about connecting people. The church, our purpose ultimately is to enjoy God in such a way that brings him glory. And we bring the gospel message, the good news message of Jesus. But that's the why. How many churches, though, have exchanged the why unintentionally for the what? Come on Sunday morning, we're this, that, or whatever. So it starts with, I think, getting back to the why and then hanging on to it. So your branding, the way you look online, your website, your like all that stuff used to be heavily criticized. I say, man, why don't you go to St. Paul's Cathedral in London and walk in and you see that stained glass and you start reading. And tell me that's not branding on a level that, tell me that doesn't affect your emotional experience, because we're not human brain. I mean, we're human beings, and people operate first out of their limbic system in their mind, which is how they feel their way through life. And then with their neocortex, they process data. When you see a logo, it elicits an emotion or doesn't. We want people, when they see or they walk into our environments, they feel the love and the presence of God, and they feel welcome. So branding and the logo, all that stuff matters. I mean, and then coming into the organization itself, what kind of culture does your church have? This is probably the greatest. There is usually a significant gap between the leadership of a company and the employees. And in church, as a pastor, there is a constant gap between the leadership and the staff, the leadership and the church. And how do you bridge that gap? Well, you've got to have processes that create good conversations to protect from the toxic work environments that we've heard about in podcasts and seen it implode churches, so that the culture of a church will be manifest somehow, some way on Sunday morning. And so you've got to work on those internal communication processes and have the right people in the right spot, and that we're dealing with problems. And then, the marketing is not advertising. Advertising is a part of marketing, but marketing in the end is storytelling. And this is, so many times a church wants a website and a digital advertisement campaign. I don't even call it marketing. Digital advertising is great, but if you're not advertising out of your why, you're just going to be another nameless face because there's no uniqueness to who you are, your identity. And so these things matter, and they matter more so now that we're more dependent upon the internet and more dependent upon technology than ever before. So I think it matters. I think I think that church planters probably understood this a lot more than pastors who've been, in it for a long time. Because when you start a church from scratch, you have to be about the why. You have to be about your branding and your culture because it's that or die. Mm-hmm. And so what we're seeing now is a lot of churches who have been around for a while are slowly descending into irrelevance, and they're losing their numbers. And this it should bother every Christian. And so the Sunday morning experience is really where the why, the purpose, the feel of your brand, the ethos of your culture, and the story of your marketing come to fruition. And if you can get that right week after week, then you start pushing the flywheel of momentum, and God and of course with the help of we market and brand, but God makes it grow. Mm-hmm. I don't know if Paul would agree with that, but in the end, God he puts his hand on something, but quite often he does it as we follow him in a process of hearing him more and more.
How would you say, you mentioned podcasts, and, there've obviously been, Hillsong documentary and Mars Hill podcast and things like that you could make an argument that the business of church has been a problem within the church. So how do we use some of the strategies that you're talking about and make sure that we can make an impact with our business acumen, but not become, make the business of church be a downfall?
I think it goes back to why. These ministries, and by the way, this isn't the first time this has ever happened in church history. I have a church history degree, so I wanted to study the revivals. I wound up spending 1,000 years in the Dark Ages. So I understand church history. These things have been going on for a long time. And it's simply this: when we walk away from our why, our first love in Jesus, and we don't have real accountability, we will drift off into areas that and then we wind up seeing people as objects. I think the big criticism of the business world is business, business people, corporations see people as things to be used, as objects to be used for their good and then thrown away. And I have seen that in churches. I have experienced it personally. Mm-hmm. And in my music ministry as a pastor, I've experienced it. Sometimes I think I've unwittingly been a part of it. Is we're so much about the outcome that we wind up using people as a means to an end. And we've heard these stories in the rise and fall of Mars Hill. We've seen it in the stories with Hillsong and other entities. But somewhere along the way, the why became about how and how much.
Yeah, and I think that's true with volunteers as well. I think that it's not just staff members. We can use volunteers to an end. Hey, your job is to go push that button, move that fader. When we're missing the why of we are creating an experience where lives are being changed and coming to faith and being discipled. That's our why. That's why you're pushing the button. We're missing that sometimes, I think, even with volunteers.
And it's the journey. So what happens is when you become about the what and the how much, it affects your culture. And then your culture becomes a culture that crushes people. And versus saying, no, we're about making disciples. And that's going to be a part of our culture. So when we have a volunteer who's pushing a button, our goal is to see them experience the goodness and the love of God and grow in their faith and use their spiritual gifts. Because when we help people use their spiritual gifts, their talents, they feel alive. Versus going, hey, we got to get the offerings up, and then people get used as a means to end it. But it's always a drift from, you call it vision drift, mission drift. But the thing is, like, those words have become bywords that we don't. Those things are dangerous. They're soul crushing. And so the culture of a church is so unbelievably important. And like I said, I felt the the side of being crushed and being felt like being used as an object. And so we have to realize that people matter to God. And therefore, it's not about getting them to do things, but really it's about all of us walking together in a journey of God's story. And that is what corporations or organizations do. That's what separates them from the good and the bad and so I think this conversation is very relevant. We're using a lot of the same words, but really in the end, it's about how do we lead people, period. I mean, right. In the end, like business, sure, it's how do we lead people? Do we lead people in a way that sees them as valuable and important and loved by God and there's a purpose for their life? Or do we see them as objects for our own purpose that we can Christianize at the end so rant over, #rant over.
Well, I also too, like, how do we realize that we're in that? I mean, nobody's going to go and say we are in a, in the middle of mission drift right now. Well, they might realize it. I'm just wondering where that line is of realizing that you've turned a corner and that you're going down. Where's that line?
So I'll reframe it this way, just to answer it from my vantage point. You have to hardwire in your organization or your church the ability to listen. Because, people were talking, people in the church, let's say, we'll say, the Mars Hills thing. If you listen to that podcast, and I listened to it and knowing many of the people who were working at that church during that time, mm-hmm. and I walked with them, so to listen to that at that level just hurt. It hurt, but they were saying things. The people were saying things along the way. The staff were saying things, and nobody was listening because there was no feedback loop, and that wasn't valued. When you look at the government, let's say we say, man, they don't listen to the people. Why don't they? And so every 4 years we have an election, and that's when people start. At least they appear to listen.
Right.
God created His church that it's not just the elders who speak, but God speaks through His body. He speaks through His leadership. He speaks through His word. And so we have to create real feedback loops, and then not be afraid to hear the truth, hear the brutal truth. The truth will set you free. And when you look at how Paul would challenge people, he got brutal, but out of love for them. What's happened is that when people create their own little kingdoms, they shut out. They think about dictators. Like, why would the leader of Russia invade a country? This doesn't seem to have any reason. Well, who's going to tell him, don't do that? It's a terrible idea, right? He has created a reality distortion field where he only listens to one or two, whoever, we don't even know. This is what happened. This is how Satan works. Mm-hmm. He gets us to become prideful, and we don't listen. And all of a sudden we've drifted. And then we look back and there were like 87 people who were trying to get our attention. Mm-hmm. And so part of that is really valuing and then building that into the culture. And that means organizational intentionality. That's business. A good business listens to its employees, and it listens to its shareholders. And it's the same thing for a church. These are just basic human dynamics that have existed. And then when they don't listen, terrible things happen. Mm-hmm. And so I think you've crossed the line when you're standing there all by yourself and everybody else is over there. And don't call that leadership. Well, I'm just a visionary. No, you've just isolated yourself, and now you're standing alone. And that's all I have to say about that.
That's good. All right, so let me hit on a couple more things as we wrap today. So I loved your realization that all along you've been doing some business aspects. So things like strategic partnerships, networking, budgets, HR, marketing and sales, things like that. Tell me more about the realization that in ministry all along you've actually been doing good business and how that can help other pastors.
Well, good and bad.
You're right.
I mean, it's true. Like if it wasn't for my strategic partnership with Stan Mosier, who was the president of Word Records for years, and him stepping into my life and taking a season of his life to partner with me and to take me different directions, I wouldn't no one would have ever heard my music at the level they had heard if I didn't have a strategic partnership with Student Life. Right. I mean, we partnered together. We're like, we're gonna work together this many weeks, and look how God used that. So I didn't think of it as strategic partnership. I was like, why wouldn't I want to be at the Student Life camp? They're like, man, we really want Joel. We talk about HR and bringing somebody onto the team, and how you do that in a haphazard way, and it crushes people, and all of a sudden they've moved 2,000 miles to be a part of your ministry, and it's a disaster. And it's because you didn't take the time to do the work and to do the detailed work to make sure they were onboarded correctly, or the culture wasn't right. You thought you misinterpreted the culture of your own organization. I mean, these things matter. Marketing, like networking. I was like, I don't sell out. I don't sell out, man. Go out and schmooze with everybody, and that's like. But the same time is when I had that mentality, I was playing to a lot fewer people and a lot fewer opportunities, because what it really was fear of putting myself out there and being rejected. I wasn't. And the other side is, I'll remember this. I remember there was GMA week years ago before the Dove Awards, and I went out, and every year I hated. I begged, like, I don't want to go out there. It's a jungle, and it's just a bunch of business, corporate, and after my song "Shadow of the Cross" took off, they're like, "You got to go. Come on, man. You got to do this." So I went, and the Lord spoke to me. I feel like on the airplane, He's like, and I just heard. I felt like the Holy Spirit was saying, invest. Don't go there, try to get your name out there. Don't go there, just go there and invest. And so every person that I saw radio, and I really connected with the radio guys. For whatever reason, I connected, and we started like going to lunch and prayed together. And then we became friends. And it wasn't intentional, because I was like, I don't know who I'm going to invest with. I thought it was going to be this group. Right. I wound up investing a lot of time with radio guys and praying for their families. And to this day, I still have relationships. Yeah. They're not working in the radio world, and I'm not making records anymore. But and I look back and I see, well, that was networking. But what my goal wasn't really just for myself as much as it was listening to the Lord. And so it's people, like you kind of see this theme of people matter. And we create these structures and these systems to protect people and to protect the message and to protect, and so it's really not a bad thing. And a lot of our prejudices against these business methodologies are really built out of fear or misunderstanding of the language and the ideas.
Man, I think that the networking piece is so interesting, because I found just like you said, you go into a situation thinking, okay, I'm probably going to meet this person, or I need to be focused on here. And you come out of that, like I'll come out of a conference and go, I never thought that I would run into that person, or God put somebody in my path, or this person knew that person. And hey, you need to meet this, and it all kind of happens together. And, you walk out and the relationships that you've built are not what you expected maybe. And I think that is, to your point, to just be open to where God is putting you and let Him direct you to the people that you need to invest in, which is a great word. And I think that's true whether you're networking yourself at a place or you're networking within the culture of your church as well, with your staff, with your volunteers. I worked at New Spring Church for a while, and the culture of the volunteers that we serve was extremely important, and we treated them almost like staff members. I mean, they were doing jobs just like staff members, and that, creating that culture and making sure that people mattered was very important. Okay, let's wrap our discussion. Then I want to play a quick game with you before you leave. So, okay. So let me ask you this to close. Are you saying that pastors need to be better businessmen? Is that what you're saying?
That's a great question, man. So I'd answer that yes, because in the end, the heart and soul of business is about people, and it's about cultivating goodness and human flourishing with our lives. And so, yes, I think a pastor it's good to have some level of competency in profit and loss and financial management, so that you don't blow up the church or go, we're going to build this building and God's going to kill me if we don't build it. You might just die of stress. These things, I think, understanding how these things work in systems and organization, it does help. But in the end, it's about relationship. Ultimately, I'll always come back to loving God and loving people. And as long as those two things are working well, then I think our business, leveraging principles of business are fine. As a matter of fact, I think they're needed.
So our ministry is called 1230 Media, and it comes from Mark 1230, and it's Jesus talking about the greatest commandment of loving God, loving people. And the idea for us is we can help you make incredible media content, help you, enhance your worship experience, help you with, training and media and great videos and graphics and all kinds of stuff. But at the end of the day, if it's not about life change, why are we doing it? It's about salvation and discipleship. It's about loving God and loving people. And it's amazing how, Jesus boiled it down into those two things. Everything about our Christian life, I believe, drills down to those two things. How do we love God and how do we love people?
Yes.
Okay. Will you play a game with me before you leave?
I will play a game with you.
Okay, here we go. This is 5 rapid fire questions. Pretty random. All right, here we go. All right, number 1, I Facebook stalked you for question number 1 here. Okay, this is hard 90s Christian music trivia. Okay. All right, you like the band PFR. Okay.
Yes.
All right, here's a random thing for you. In the early 90s, PFR released their 3rd album called Great Lengths, which was probably their best album, in my opinion. So on the Great Lengths tour, a new band was introduced and opened for PFR. Brand new band came out of the Great Lengths tour. Who was it?
Skillet?
Jars of Clay.
Jars of Clay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Crazy. Yeah. I didn't know that.
It's another great band and great songwriting.
Yeah. Man, their first couple albums were awesome.
Oh, man. Yes.
All right. Number 2, what is something that you see in the church that makes you sad?
Toxic leadership.
All right. Number 3, what is your
I really lifted things up after that.
Debbie Downer.
Like Jars of Clay.
Toxic leadership. All right. Number 3, what is your proudest accomplishment?
Seeing my kids' trajectory go towards Christ. And I say accomplishment in that, I have made a bunch of mistakes as a dad, but making those investments in their lives, I have never regretted it. And that really is, if there's a legacy, it's not in the songs or the thing, it's them. And yeah.
Good. All right. Number 4, is there a TV show that you're embarrassed to say that you watch? Guilty pleasure TV show.
Oh my goodness. There's a TV show that I am, it's really not a TV show, but High School Musical 2.
I think you would enjoy A Week Away. If you're in the High School Musical 2, you're going to go away tonight and watch A Week Away on
I'm
Netflix.
telling you, man, I don't know how this has happened, but High School Musical 2, and my kids love it. And I was like, man, this is cheesy. And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, but there's that they're dancing. And it's just like, and I'm like, but I'm like singing along and, it's, yeah.
That's funny. All right. Last question for you. What is one thing that you would encourage those going into ministry to pay more attention to?
Yeah, your daily walk with the Lord. That is the key to everything that is good that has ever happened in my life has happened out of the overflow of being in the presence of the Lord and standing on his promises. And typically it's the first thing that once we get a little bit of ministry success, we throw it out the window and charge on. And
isn't that interesting, man?
Yep.
It is. It's the first thing that goes, which you would think that we would remember that. If we have any form of success in the world's eyes or in ministry, you would think that we would remember that. But you're right, man. That seems to be the first to go and cause that drift, I think.
Yes.
Well, man, thank you so much. Appreciate you playing the game with me, and also great insight, man. Really appreciate your time and everything that you share. How can people follow what you're doing now?
You know what? The best way is to go to discoveram.com. That's the AM agency, and check out what we're doing. I'm so passionate about seeing how business leaders can integrate God into their business and see how the business can impact the kingdom of God and impact the world. That is my passion, and it's such a great company. The CEO and I have been friends for 25 years. He did my first album cover, and now God's built this whole thing. And so I'd say, hey, come check us out there, and we'll hang out and we'll talk.
Awesome. Thank you so much, man.
Yeah, man. My privilege.
Hey guys, I'm hanging out with my friend Steve Dirks. At 12:30, we do ready-made, we do custom media content, we do training, and our team is incredible. We just have a heart to serve ministry and churches. And Steve, I just wanted to talk to you for just a minute and just kind of get your heart on why you serve churches through 12:30. What's your heart behind why and how you serve them?
Yeah, so my heart for serving at 12:30 is I was on a church staff for many years and had a never-ending list of stuff to always complete. And what always took a backside was caring for my team and doing the stuff that would potentially cause the most fruit within my church sphere. And so for me, I have a heart of really coming alongside churches and helping you guys do worship well, but not having to give up doing something that maybe is more practical for you to be doing on the ground at your church. And so one thing that was, hugely beneficial and that has been beneficial for a lot of churches is outsourcing lyric videos, outsourcing bumper videos, content like that takes a lot of time just sitting at a computer doing that you maybe don't need to be doing, where you could work with someone like me and our team. And so I love coming alongside guys like you at your church, figuring out what do you want to create, how do you want to create it. You get to lay out exactly what the parameters are, what's the ball that we're going to play in, so to speak. You can lay out the football field, and then I get to take that to our team and have us create something that matches what you are looking for, exactly what you need, and hopefully save you time and stress at the same time. So that's what I love doing. That's what I love that I get to do here at 12:30. And if we can ever do that, reach out to us, and I will look forward to meeting you in your church.
Yeah, guys, and I want you to see that. I want you to see that we're not some big company that's way off, somewhere. We're real people. We're real ministry folks that most of us, all of us came from church world, ministry world. We have a huge heart, like Steve was saying, to serve you and serve churches. And if we can do that, if we can help you with custom especially, which Steve is the man that really connects you with our team in getting your custom projects in the works and done, feel free to reach out to us, 1230.media/quote. 1230.media/quote will get you started.
The show notes for this episode are available now at makingsundayhappen.com.
Hey guys, hope you enjoyed the podcast this week and learning from Joel. Next week, we will have a family episode of the podcast as I welcome Jeff McClarty, our Director of Ready-Made Media and Creative Director at 1230. Jeff is also a Communications Director at Mountain View Church in Queen Creek, Arizona. We're going to be talking about how to structure your church communications team, how to form your comm team like an agency that serves all the ministries in your church, and specifically how your comm team can help promote and craft the Sunday experience. So that's next week on the show. We'll go out there and create some incredible worship experiences this weekend. I'll catch you next week.
Making Sunday Happen is a production of the ministry of 1230 Media. For show notes, archive episodes, and more free resources for your church, visit makingsundayhappen.com.